Let me ask you something honest. How many times have you stopped yourself, not because you couldn't do it, but because something inside you said you weren't supposed to? That you were too young, too inexperienced, too different. That someone like you doesn't get to win. We live in a world that hands us labels before we even get a chance to prove who we are. Too loud. Too quiet. Too ambitious. Not the right background, not the right look, not the right kind of person for this room. And somewhere along the way, many of us start to believe those labels. We start shrinking. We start second-guessing. We start waiting for permission that never comes, to become the person we know we could be. We face failure and call it a sign that we should stop, when really it's just the cost of admission to something great. We compare our insides to other people's outsides, and we always come up short. We work hard in silence and wonder why no one notices, and then when someone does notice, we panic, because what if we can't sustain it? What if it was a fluke? These are not small problems. These are the quiet battles that determine the entire shape of a life. And most people never talk about them out loud. But today I want to tell you about someone who did. Someone who faced every single one of those doubts, every single one of those outside voices trying to define her, and she answered them. Not with words. With decades of work, fire, and unshakable belief. Her name is Serena Jaimka Williams. And her story is about what happens when a human being decides, truly decides, that no one else gets to write their story for them. Compton, California. Early 1980s. A man named Richard Williams watched a women's tennis match on television, saw the prize money for the winner, and made a decision on the spot. His daughters were going to be tennis champions. There was only one problem. He had never played tennis in his life. His family had no money for lessons, no access to elite clubs, no network in the sport. But he had a plan, handwritten, 78 pages long, and he had two daughters named Venus and Serena. Serena was born on September 26, 1981. She grew up not at a country club, but on public courts in Compton, courts with cracked asphalt and gang activity around the edges. She and Venus practiced while others would have gone home. They hit balls that were literally taped together when they couldn't afford new ones. While other tennis prodigies were training at elite academies in Florida and receiving private coaching from the world's best, Serena was learning the game on broken courts, guided by a father whose credentials came entirely from his own research and belief. The tennis establishment looked at her and saw everything they didn't expect. She didn't look like the players they were used to seeing. She came from a world they didn't understand. And from the very beginning, there were people who made it clear she was not exactly welcomed in their world. But Serena Williams is not someone who waits for a welcome. I really think a champion is defined not by their wins, but by how they can recover when they fall, she said once. She turned professional at the age of 14. She was young, bold, and completely unafraid of power. She hit the ball harder than almost anyone on the women's tour. By 1999, she was just 17 years old when she walked onto the court at the US Open and won her first Grand Slam title. 17. The girl from Compton. The one people said didn't belong. And then, the story gets harder. Because greatness is never a straight line. In 2003, Serena's beloved older sister Yatun Price, who was not a tennis player but simply her big sister, her friend, was shot and killed in Compton. Serena was devastated. She fell into a deep depression. She barely played. She gained weight. She questioned everything. For 2 years, she was barely competitive. Critics wrote her off. They said she had lost her fire, that she had peaked at 21, that the game had passed her by. Some commentators were cruel about her appearance and her absence from the tour in ways that were ugly to witness. And here is where the story of Serena Williams becomes something much bigger than tennis. She came back. She came back not as the player she had been, but as something more. Between 2005 and 2015, she rebuilt herself. Physically, mentally, emotionally. She won Wimbledon. She won the Australian Open. She won the French Open. She won the US Open. She won them again and again. She added major titles in her late 20s and her 30s, when people in her sport are usually declining. She won the Australian Open in 2017 while 8 weeks pregnant, and only found out after the tournament that she had been pregnant at all. She was 35 years old, and she just won a Grand Slam. While pregnant. I've had to learn to fight all my life. Got to learn to keep smiling. If you smile, things will work out, she said. But the story doesn't get easier from there, because after giving birth to her daughter Olympia in September 2017, Serena nearly died. She suffered a pulmonary embolism, blood clots in her lungs, and required emergency surgery. She had to fight with hospital staff to take her own symptoms seriously. She has spoken publicly about the terrifying experience of almost losing her life days after becoming a mother, and the way her medical concerns were initially dismissed. She recovered. She came back to the tour. And in 2018, she reached the Wimbledon final and the US Open final, less than a year after almost dying. Think about that. Not just the physical achievement, but the psychological one. The will required to step back onto one of the world's biggest stages, in front of millions of people, after everything her body had been through. Throughout her career, Serena dealt with something that very few champions are asked to handle. She was judged not just as an athlete, but as a symbol. Commentators criticized her body. There were controversies about her tennis outfits that no male player would ever face. She received harsher penalties for emotional reactions on court than male counterparts in similar situations. She was called aggressive, difficult, unsporting, words that were never applied to others in the same way. She was penalized, fined, and criticized in ways that often had nothing to do with her tennis and everything to do with the discomfort her presence seemed to cause. She could have become bitter. She could have shrunk. Many people would have. Instead, Serena Williams won 23 Grand Slam singles titles. 23. More than any other player in the Open era. She held the world #1 ranking for 319 weeks across her career. She won 4 Olympic gold medals. She won at Roland Garros on slow clay. She won at Wimbledon on fast grass. She won at the US Open, where her journey began. She won the Australian Open 7 times. She built not just a career but an empire, becoming a venture capitalist, a fashion designer, an executive, a mother, and she did it all without ever pretending to be someone she was not. Every woman's success should be an inspiration to another. We're strongest when we cheer each other on, said Serena. Her principles, when you study her life, are not complicated. They are consistent. First, she never let outside voices become inside voices. The criticism was constant and sometimes vicious. She heard it. She acknowledged it. And she walked onto the court anyway. She understood that other people's opinions of her were their business, not hers. Second, she treated failure as data, not as identity. When she lost, and she did lose, including some painful, high-profile losses, she did not let those defeats define her story. She studied them, she learned from them, and she got back to work. She lost 4 Grand Slam finals in 2018 alone. And she kept going. Third, she protected her purpose. Even during the years when depression and grief took her off the court, she never abandoned the thing she was built to do. She stepped back when she needed to heal. That is not weakness, that is wisdom. Fourth, she expanded her definition of strength. Late in her career, Serena spoke openly about redefining what it means to be powerful, not just the explosive ground strokes and the dominant serve, but the ability to be vulnerable, to be a mother, to transition from one great chapter to another with grace. When she announced her retirement from professional tennis in 2022, she called it not a retirement but an evolution, and she meant it. She is now a successful venture capitalist, having founded Serena Ventures, which has invested in over 60 companies, many of them led by women and minority founders who the traditional investment world had overlooked. Sound familiar? So what does Serena Williams have to do with you? Everything. You don't have to want to be a tennis champion. You don't have to dream of Wimbledon. But somewhere in your life, there is a court you're afraid to walk onto. A goal you've told yourself belongs to someone else. A room you've been standing outside of, waiting to feel ready, waiting to feel qualified, waiting to feel like enough. Serena Williams grew up on cracked courts in Compton with taped-together tennis balls. She was told, implicitly and explicitly by the culture of her sport, that she was not what a champion was supposed to look like. She buried her sister. She almost died giving birth. She was criticized more harshly than almost any athlete of her generation, and she won more than almost any athlete in history. She didn't wait to feel confident before she acted. She acted, and confidence came from the action. That is the secret that most people spend their whole lives searching for. Confidence is not the starting point. It is the result of doing the thing when you're afraid. I am lucky that whatever fear I have inside me, my desire to win is always stronger, she said. Whatever you are carrying right now, the doubt, the grief, the years that felt wasted, the times you were dismissed, the failures you are still embarrassed by, none of that has to be the end of your story. It can be the Compton chapter, the chapter before everything changes. Strength is not the absence of struggle. It is the decision to keep going inside the struggle. Confidence is not a personality trait that some people are born with. It is a skill you build by showing up again and again, even when you are terrified, even when you are exhausted, even when the voice inside you says this is not for you. It is for you. Serena Williams did not ask the world's permission to be great. She did not wait for the tennis establishment to welcome her. She did not become smaller so that other people would feel more comfortable. She showed up as herself, fully, completely, unapologetically, and she let her work do the talking for 27 years. You have that same capacity. Not to be Serena Williams, to be the fullest version of yourself. To walk onto your court, whatever that court is, and compete with everything you have. To fall and get up. To lose and learn. To carry your pain without letting it carry you. The world needs people who refuse to shrink. People who decide, in the face of every reason to stop, to keep going. People who understand that the most powerful thing you can do is simply to believe in yourself one day longer than doubt does. That is Serena's lesson. That is her gift to all of us. Now go win your match.